Emma Lang had never set out to build a life that looked like a photograph in a frame, and yet somehow that was what she woke into most mornings. Light slanting softly through the linen curtains, the thrum of a commuter train miles away carrying other people to other lives. The smell of good coffee blooming from the kitchen where Michael was already up, barefoot and humming some tune he never remembered the name of. He always left notes, little inked anchors in the drifting sea of days, torn strips from yellow legal pads, stuck to the sugar jar or the kettle or to the mirror above the entryway table. See you tonight. Love you. Back at 5. Pasta? You are the reason I like mornings. It wasn't grand, their orchestra of ordinary, but it was theirs, and in the quiet suburb outside Chicago, where the sidewalks remembered children's chalk drawings long past rain, ordinary had a music of its own. On Sundays, they ate breakfast out on the porch, no matter the season. In winter, they wore coats over pajamas and drank coffee that steamed like breath. In spring, the world smelled wet and new. In summer, Michael would slice peaches into thick crescent moons and laugh when the juice ran down his wrist, the gold watch he'd inherited from his father glinting in the light. He ran a small construction firm that took pride in porches like their own, in roofs that didn't leak, in beams that met where they were supposed to. Men in well-worn boots knew his name. Homeowners kept his number stuck to their fridges with magnets shaped like apples and cartoon dogs. He was patient, steady, maddeningly fair. If someone couldn't pay the full bill all at once, he found a way to set a schedule that didn't bankrupt them. "We build homes," he would say when Emma asked why he always cut it close, why he never seemed to press. "We don't build worries." He had a way of listening like the world was a vinyl record and he didn't want to scratch it. Emma loved him first for that, and then for the way he took up space in a room without crowding it, for how he folded himself into her when she leaned on him, for how he remembered her mother's birthday but forgot his own lunch and would call her sheepishly at noon to confess he had an apple and a screwdriver, which he did not recommend as a meal. He was not ostentatious about his kindness. He was almost careless with it, the way people are careless with air. You don't notice it until it's gone. Emma had met him in a world that now felt sepia-toned. A college hallway that hummed with buzzing fluorescents, a flyer for a student theater build that needed hands and hammers, Emma with paint under her fingernails from a set she was designing on a shoestring, Michael showing up with a tape measure and a brazen grin, and later, the two of them standing barefoot on a stage after midnight, breathing sawdust and amber light, arguing whether the flats should be 2 inches farther stage left. After graduation, life had sifted them to where they were meant to be, as if gravity knew their names. Emma into a junior curator position at a small art space on Milwaukee Avenue. Michael into the business his father had cobbled together from jobs he'd taken to put food on the table. Patchwork that became a company when Michael started logging expenses in neat spreadsheets and insisting on insurance and fair wages. Even their fights had a gentleness, though in the moment they felt like squalls. They fought about an unplanned weekend that got swallowed by work, about the shade of blue for the guest room, about whether or not to host Michael's brother at Christmas. Evan had a talent for showing up the way hunger shows up, uninvited and difficult to ignore. His smile had a cut to it, charming until it wasn't. He wore good clothes wrong, loud ties that called attention away from the frayed edges. He made friends easily and kept them until their pockets were lighter. The first time Emma met him, he had brought flowers to the door, white lilies that somehow smelled like money. The second time, he forgot her name and called her sweetheart with the kind of familiarity that assumes consent. He could be funny and warm, and he knew it, and it made him dangerous. He stood too close to win you over and too far to catch you when you fell. Michael loved him anyway. Brothers are not a story one writes and edits cleanly. They are a blur of shared bedrooms and hand-me-downs and the kind of loyalty that isn't learned so much as grafted, scar by gnarly scar. When their father died, Michael cleaned out the house and paid the taxes, drove their mother to appointments, Made sure she never learned to check the oil because he would always do it. Evan took their father's watch and couldn't be found for 2 weeks. When he came back, he cried in their mother's kitchen and left with a check. Michael wrote another and another. "Don't," Emma told him the 3rd time, when the debt was a number with a comma and Evan's promises were exactly as reliable as wishes. "You think you're helping him, but you're just padding the bed he doesn't want to get out of." Michael had stared at his hands at the kitchen table where so many small decisions had become a life. The late light turned him to something like a painting. "He's my brother," he said finally, as if it were an argument the universe had already decided in advance. "I keep hoping he'll see. I don't know. That steady is the only thing that lasts." "And when he doesn't?" Emma asked, but her voice softened because she knew the shape of his heart, the way it made room even when there wasn't any left. Their house lived in small details. The chip in the rim of the green bowl they refused to throw away because all their first-year dinners ended up in it. The scuffed baseboard in the hallway from moving the bookcase 1 inch, then another, finding the exact right place. The plant that kept not dying in the corner by the window even when Emma forgot to water it. They bought a rug that didn't match anything until suddenly it did. On Fridays, they opened a bottle of wine and told each other the worst and best parts of their week in a ritual that was half confession and half benediction. Sometimes Michael fell asleep on the couch with a documentary murmuring to itself and his forearm flung over his eyes like he was hiding from the sun. Sometimes Emma woke at 3 and wandered to the kitchen for water and stopped in the doorway just to look at him breathing. The small things that meant most, requiring only the witness of one person who knew how to see. When their friend group began the slow, inevitable migration toward babies and backyard birthday parties, Emma felt the ache of a question humming under each conversation. They had tried for a while to answer it. They had sat in sterile rooms with posters about fertility, like advertisements for something you could buy if you only had the right card. They had taken walks that lasted for miles where they told the truth slowly, like walking into cold water. Michael confessed first that he was afraid of failing, of holding a life in his hands and seeing it hurt and not knowing how to fix it. Emma confessed next that she was tired of her body being a problem to solve, that she resented the calendar, the ovulation apps that chirped like overeager birds. They decided together to let quiet be quiet. When people asked, and people always ask, they learned to say, "We're happy, thank you," and leave it gently on the table like a glass that could spill if someone bumped it. Work threaded through their days in ways that felt like character notes rather than plot points. Michael would come home smelling faintly of cedar, with dust caught in the constellation of his hairline. He kept a notebook for each project, crisp white pages filling with measurements, sketches, lists. His handwriting neat enough to suggest a different life he might have lived. A teacher, maybe, steady in front of a chalkboard. He liked good tools and old trucks that he somehow coaxed into running with the patience of a saint. The guys on his crew trusted him because he never asked them to do something he wouldn't do. He was the sort who held the other end of the beam, who climbed up first to show a thing was safe. Emma's world was color and curation, titles typed on cards that hung beside works that sometimes made people furious, sometimes made them cry. She loved leaning in close to brush a speck from glass, loved standing in the empty gallery 30 minutes before opening and hearing the hum of the lights and nothing else, loved the way a well-placed bench could change the way a person took in a piece. She had a talent for arranging things so the space between them felt like part of the art. At home, Michael teased her gently for moving objects an inch to the left. "Everything talks to everything," she said. "I'm just helping with the conversation." In autumns, they drove out to the cider mill and watched children in puffer jackets roll down a hill that had probably been rolled down by other children for 100 years. In summers, they walked the lake at dusk with soft serve melting too fast to manage. They were not perfect, but they were alive to the ridiculous pleasure of being each other's person, of knowing the sound of the other's step on the porch, of hearing a hand on the banister and feeling the tendons of one's own heart soften. The first hairline crack in the bowl of their life, if Emma had to point to it later, came not with a crash, but with a phone call in the odd hour between the end of the afternoon and the beginning of the evening. She was closing up the gallery, lights going dark one by one like eyelids, when her phone buzzed and Evan's name pressed at her from the screen. She let it ring out. He called again. She answered because that was what one did in a family. You opened even when you didn't want to. You let more in. "Emma," Evan said, and the way he said her name made it a card trick, something in his hand rather than in her chest. "Listen, is Michael home?" "He's on his way," she said, scanning the room instinctively to see if anything had been left out of place. A paperclip glinted like a dropped star by the front desk. "What do you need?" A sigh rehearsed. "I made a mistake. A few, if we're being technical. I have to meet someone tonight and I'm short. It's temporary. You know me." She did. That was the problem. "We talked about this," she said, and heard in her own voice the soft click of a lock she had turned too many times. "You need to talk to Michael if you're asking for anything." "Of course," he said brightly, relief like a shade rising. "Of course, I'm only giving you a heads up." By the time Emma made it home, Michael was at the kitchen table with a calculator, the syllables of their life reduced to digits and decisions. He looked up and smiled with his mouth, but not his eyes. "He's on his way over," he said. "Just for a minute." She boiled water because that was what she knew to do with restless hands. The kettle sang. Outside, the nearest neighbor's dog announced the approach of someone with the particular fervor reserved for squirrels and men who needed money. Evan came in smelling of cold air and something sweet and chemical. He peeled off his gloves and said all the right things. "You look great, Em. How's the gallery? I saw an article about you. Wish I'd clipped it." He had the bottle of whiskey like a talisman, held slightly away from his body as if he were a priest presenting sacrament. "A peace offering," he said, his smile a flare. He didn't say, "I need you." He didn't have to. Michael poured 3 small glasses. The whiskey was expensive enough to brag for itself. They sat, the 3 of them, like a family in a painting where 2 figures are faithful and one is just visiting. Evan talked about a friend in Los Angeles with a startup about to go public, about a woman who loved him desperately and also unfortunately lived with her husband, about the way the world was about to notice him finally, and then they would all see. He laughed easily, scattered compliments like birdseed. He didn't quite look anyone straight on. Later, in bed, Emma lay quiet as Michael stared at the ceiling in the dark glow that made the room feel underwater. "I told him no," he said. "I had to. We're tight right now." "I know," she said, and let her hand find his. "I'm proud of you." He nodded as if the word were heavier than it was. Weeks went by. The crack remained a crack, a fine line that caught the light if you looked from the right angle. Life knit itself as it always had. Coffee, trains, notes on sugar jars, peach crescents in July, Michael forgetting his lunch and Emma leaving the gallery with a brown paper bag and walking it to him at a site where a house stood with its bones showing, and he looked at her like she had invented him. The weather turned again. Emma adjusted the gallery's winter show, thinking often of composition, of how closeness and distance on a wall could mean intimacy or menace depending on light. If there was a second crack, it was in the way Michael's mother's voice flickered on the phone. She had always been a woman who thought grief was a corset. One cinches it tight and stands up straight. But now she sounded tired, edges worn. Once, while Emma stirred a pot of soup, she overheard Michael ask about Evan. There was a pause on the other end, then, "He's trying," their mother said, with that valiant and losing tone people use when hope is a job description. "He says he's found something." The call ended with a kind of hanging, a half-finished stitch pulled through fabric and left there looping. Emma kept catching Michael in the act of recalculating in his head, tiny abacuses clicking behind his eyes. He ran his hand through his hair more often. He took his watch off at the end of the day and rubbed the polished flat of it with his thumb as if it were a lamp that might conjure something if he were only tender enough. One night at dinner he mentioned casually, too casually, that Evan had repaid a small amount. "He's trying," Michael said, and Emma had to bite back. The reflexive, ferocious trying is what people say when they are hoping you'll carry the rest. They argued about Christmas again. "We could host your mother," Emma said. "Just her. She can stay in the guest room. We can go to the late service and pretend it means something deeper than tradition." "And Evan?" Michael said, even though they both knew the answer. Emma's fork hovered. "He doesn't come here drunk. He doesn't come here to ask." She set the fork down. "He doesn't make me feel like I'm a stage he's performing on." Michael flinched at that, at the fairness of it. "Okay," he said. He reached for her hand, found it. "Okay." In neighborhoods like theirs, winter comes in a string of small surrenders. Leaves let go. The sunset shows up early to take attendance. You learn exactly where the draft under the front door lives and how to tuck a towel to quiet it. One afternoon, snow arrived noiselessly and made even the ugly things beautiful. The municipal garbage cans silked and frosted as if for a gala. Emma walked home through a city softened into kindness. In the kitchen, she stood to warm her hands on the kettle and looked along the row of notes Michael had left in the past week on the mirror by the door. Back by 6. "How are you this pretty? Remember, the world is lucky to have you." She smiled at her own reflection until she could feel her face unknit. She pulled the note free and stuck it on her heart like a bandage that knew what hurt and where. That night they ate pasta with too much garlic and danced to a song on the radio that had no business being romantic. And it was anyway. Later, wrapped in the quilt Emma's grandmother had sewn from dresses she'd once worn to church, they took turns reading lines from a book of poems whose margins were already crowded with other people's pencil thoughts. "Doesn't it make you feel as if strangers are our relatives?" Emma said, and Michael said, "All the best ones are." And still, a life is a solved puzzle until you notice the one piece you assumed was there and isn't. The third crack did not announce itself as a crack at all. It came one afternoon with the ordinary chime of Emma's phone, a text from Michael that said, "Might be late. Meeting a supplier for cedar. Want to lock a price?" She texted back a heart and a thumbs up, then immediately sent a second text because she hated that thumbs up could be read as glib. "Be safe. Want me to wait up?" He didn't answer, which was not unusual. Sometimes his phone fell to the bottom of the world in his tool bag and stayed there. At 8, she plated dinner and wrapped his portion because everything in her life had a place, and this was where his went when he wasn't here. At 9:30, the door opened and he came in flushed with that mixture of cold and relief that meant the work had been worthy. He kissed her forehead and inhaled as if he could grow a second set of lungs from the smell of her shampoo. "Locked it," he said. "We're going to be okay." She didn't realize then that he meant they were going to be okay again. She didn't yet know about the line of credit he'd opened for a client who'd lost a job in the middle of a remodel, or about the invoice Evan had promised to cover because he owed him one, or about the way Michael's calculator had started to feel like a rosary under his fingers. People who are clean forget to look for dirt because the world they live in has taught them to expect their own reflection in the glass. Emma had never learned to suspect. On a Tuesday that was trying very hard to be worse than a Monday, the gallery's heat coughed and gave up around 11. Visitors stood in their coats, breath visible, attempting to be reverent about abstraction with their fingers going numb. Emma called the landlord, who promised a man would be there within the hour. 4 hours later, she unlocked the door for the man with the flashlight and the knit hat that said Bears in block letters. He fixed it in 15 minutes and lingered for 30, standing unreasonably close to a piece that looked to Emma like the memory of winter rather than winter itself. "People pay for this?" he said finally, squinting to be respectful. Looks like the wind got bored. Exactly, Emma said, because people enjoyed hearing their derision named as insight. When he left, she looked at the work again and felt, for the first time, a tremor of impatience with the way the world required her to translate it. She felt an enormous desire to go home, the way one does when you are suddenly aware of the smallness of the shell you live in. Home. The word had begun to hold an echo. They had dinner at a little place on a corner that had changed hands 3 times, but kept the same old neon sign. Michael told a story about a nail gun misfire that made Emma cringe and then laugh, the way horror pulled its elbow to make way for humor. "I need to call Mom," he said, sliding his empty plate away with the satisfied glide of someone who had eaten exactly what he wanted. She left a message. "Invite her for Sunday," Emma said. "I'll make that roast she loves." He nodded, and his eyes did that thing they did sometimes, where something moved across them like a cloud over water. "I love you," he said, sudden, like a truth discovered. "Okay," she said, just as sudden, because she liked to answer the ordinary as if it were sacred. "Me too." What Emma would remember later about that night would be the way the waitress refilled their water glasses in perfect tandem, left then right, like choreography. The man at the bar alone with a newspaper folded to the crossword. The way Michael slid the bill toward him with that casual grace that meant he had already done the math and it came out in the world's favor. She would remember the way the air felt, calm but taut. The way the sky feels when snow is deciding whether to ruin traffic. She would remember that on the walk back to the car, a woman passed them with a dog in a sweater, and the dog looked up at Emma as if to say, "You're doing fine," and Emma believed it. She would not remember the 2 men sitting in a parked sedan across the street, the engine off, one of them tapping a rhythm on the steering wheel that had no song to it. She would not remember because she did not see them, because who watches the quiet when the noise is yours to enjoy? Nights in their neighborhood carry sound like gossip. Wind talked to wind. A door closing 3 houses down felt familiar. Emma stood at the sink when they got home and rinsed plates under a stream that proved again its small miracle of being both there and then gone. Michael's phone vibrated on the counter with the insistence of someone who believes themselves missed. He glanced at it, and then at her. "Work," he said, and she nodded because it always was, until it wasn't. She went upstairs to fold laundry. It was a task she loved, the squared edges and the stacks, the way order could be made to happen with hands. When she came back down, the kitchen was empty, and the back door stood open a fraction, cold knifing in. Michael's voice floated from the yard, a shape of sound without the words. She stepped into her boots to follow it and found him at the garage, half in shadow, phone pressed to his ear. "No," he was saying, gentle but granite. "No, Ev. Not again." Her breath caught, not in surprise but in recognition, like tripping over a stair you've tripped on before. She didn't move, as if by holding still she could keep the scene from tilting. Michael listened, jaw tight, then said, "I can't." And it sounded like a sacrament, the negative made holy by repetition. He ended the call and closed his eyes for a second in the posture of a man reciting a prayer backward to see if it still worked. When he noticed her, he shook his head and gave a smile that started and then decided against itself. "It's nothing," he said, which was their code for "it's something I don't want to make ours." She didn't press because marriage is the art of choosing which doors to leave closed. Later, in bed, she traced the old scar on his shoulder from a fall that time he'd been young and reckless on a roof. He turned into her palm the way a plant turns to light. "We're okay," he said. "We're okay," she echoed. Because it's important to say the thing you want to be true out loud, so it has a place to stand when truth arrives. Days thinned. Snow crusted and dulled. January held its breath the way Chicago always did, waiting to see if the lake would crack out loud in the night. On a morning so cold the car complained about it. Emma found one of Michael's notes on the sugar jar that just said, "Tonight with a heart and an arrow." She smiled, rolling the little arrow between her fingers like a secret. That evening, she set the table with the good plates because life requires the good plates on Tuesdays as much as on anniversaries. She simmered a sauce that made the house smell like patience and remembered why cooking had, at some point, felt like choosing the world. The doorbell rang at 6:20, and Michael, working late, texted, "Parking. Be there in 5." Emma wiped her hands on a towel and went to the door with the expectation of her husband's shape filling it. Instead, she opened it to find a shape she knew as well as she wished she didn't. Evan stood there with Winter on his shoulders and charm arranged precisely on his face, holding a bottle that gleamed like polished amber and a small box wrapped in paper, the color of a promise. "Evening, Em," he said, and smiled as if there had never been an argument in the world he could not turn into a joke that made you love him. "I brought a peace offering." Behind him, the sky had gone from blue to the shade just before blue remembers it can be black. In the kitchen, a pot on low whispered to itself, as if pleading not to be forgotten. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard spoke in the voice of old wood, ready to note what passed over it. Emma stepped back because that is what you do when the night presents itself at your door with something that looks like a gift. She stepped back and let him in, the cold folding itself into the warm, the line between outside and in blurring the way lines do when they are about to be crossed. Evan's smile was the kind that had been polished by years of needing to get out of trouble. It could disarm a debt collector, soften a mother, or make a woman believe she'd misjudged him all along. Standing there in the doorway, with the bottle glinting amber between his gloved hands, he looked like a man rehearsed in sincerity. The kind of man who could say, "I've changed," and almost believe it himself. Emma hesitated only long enough to see her own reflection ripple in the glass before stepping aside. The warmth of the house folded over him, and with it came the small betrayals of scent and memory. Michael's cologne, the sauce simmering on the stove, the faint pine from the wreath Emma had hung too early this year because she wanted light before December. Evan exhaled like someone arriving home after exile. "Nice place," he said, glancing around, eyes moving too fast to mean it. "Smells amazing. Is that rosemary?" Emma shut the door behind him, the latch clicking like a clock counting down. "It's just tomato and garlic," she said. "Michael's on his way." "Good," Evan said, flashing teeth that could pass for warmth. "I owe him a drink. Been meaning to—" He stopped when he saw the table. 2 plates, 2 glasses, silverware placed with the careful symmetry of a woman who believed in balance. Something shifted behind his eyes. Embarrassment, envy, maybe hunger. "I'm interrupting." "You usually are," Emma said, and turned back to the stove before she could watch the sting land. For a moment, the kitchen was all small sounds, the simmer of sauce, the pop of wood in the heater vent, Evan's shifting weight as he removed his gloves. Then came the voice that had once charmed professors, police, and girlfriends alike. "I came to make things right." "You could start by leaving," she said. He chuckled, low and wounded. "I deserve that." When Michael arrived, snow dusted his coat shoulders like chalk. He paused in the doorway, one hand still on the frame, taking in the scene. His wife at the stove, his brother at the counter, the open bottle already breathing into the air between them. For a heartbeat, Emma saw something ancient in his expression, weariness shaped like forgiveness. "Ev," he said, "you couldn't wait 5 minutes?" "I brought the good stuff." Evan raised the bottle, grin rehearsed but not entirely false. "For old times." Michael hung his coat and took the bottle, turning it in his hands as though inspecting a relic. "You hate whiskey." "I'm trying to grow up. That'll be the day." Michael's smile broke the tension, and for a while it felt almost like family again. They sat around the table, the bottle between them like a candle. The whiskey burned clean, the way expensive things do, erasing protest with its smoothness. Conversations skittered across safe surfaces. Weather, work, the bear's latest failure. Evan praised the sauce, complimented the house, told Emma she'd done miracles with the place. She nodded without answering. Then, casually, he said, "You remember that deal I told you about last year? The property out near Oak Ridge? Well, it's finally coming through." Michael's glass paused midair. "I thought that fell apart." "Resurrected," Evan said brightly. "Got a new investor. Only catch is, I need to move fast. Couple days, tops. Just to bridge the gap. After that, it's Profit City." The words dropped like pebbles into deep water. Emma could feel the silence expanding outward. "Evan," Michael said softly. "No." "Mike." "No," he repeated, setting his glass down. "Not again." Emma stayed quiet, eyes on the tablecloth, tracing the thread pattern with her thumb. She could feel Evan's stare flick to her, searching for sympathy he'd already lost. "It's not like that," he insisted. "It's not alone. It's an opportunity. You always said—" "I said no," Michael cut in, and the quiet finality of it startled even himself. Evan leaned back, arms crossing over his chest, smile cracking. "You think you're better than me now? Because you built some houses and married a saint?" "Stop," Michael said, tired. Emma rose, collecting plates that hadn't been touched. "Dinner's over," she said. The words seemed to unlock something ugly. Evan stood too quickly, chair scraping. "You know what your problem is. You think kindness is a virtue when it's just fear in a better suit." "Leave," Emma said, not loud but clear enough to slice through the air. Evan's laugh came out brittle. He grabbed his coat and the bottle, almost knocking over a glass. "Enjoy your perfect little life," he said, and was gone, the door slamming against the cold. Michael stood there a long time, shoulders bowed, as if bracing against an invisible wind. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "For what?" "For being his brother." Emma stepped close, touched his arm. "You're not responsible for his ruin." "Maybe not," he said, "but I keep handing him the matches." They cleaned in silence. Outside, snow thickened, erasing footprints before they could freeze. By the time they went to bed, Evan was already a ghost pacing the edges of their thoughts. Days passed. The house resumed its rhythm. Work, meals, notes on the mirror. Yet something had shifted, like a floorboard loosening underfoot. Michael grew quiet in ways that weren't rest, but worry turned inward. He made phone calls in the garage, came in smelling of cold and sawdust, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. Emma tried to ask, but he only smiled that gentle, impossible smile and said, "Just work things. Don't worry." Then, on a gray Thursday, Evan called again. Emma knew it by the way Michael's voice softened into that resigned tone particular to family. He stepped outside, talking low, pacing. When he came back in, his face was pale. What did he want? "To meet," he said. Said it's important. She didn't ask if he'd agreed. She knew he had. That night, when the doorbell rang, the clock read 8:30. Emma opened it expecting the delivery guy she'd been told would drop off some paperwork from the gallery. Instead, Evan stood there again. Alone this time. No bottle, no swagger. Just rain on his coat and eyes too wide. "I need to see him," he said. "He's busy," Emma lied. "Please." Something in his voice, real fear, not the kind he used to manipulate, made her hesitate. She called for Michael. They spoke in the living room. Emma lingered in the kitchen, pretending to tidy while every word came through the thin wall like confession. "Not a big deal," Evan was saying. "Just a misunderstanding. A business partner got jumpy. He thinks I owe him, but it's temporary." "How much?" Michael asked. A pause. $75,000. Emma's hands stilled on the counter. Michael exhaled, low and long. Jesus, Evan. I'll pay it back. You know I will. I just need time. Time won't save you from people like that. I can't go to the cops, Evan said. You don't understand what these guys... Michael's voice sharpened. Don't drag me into this. You're all I've got. That sentence hung in the air until it broke. Later, after Evan left, Michael sat at the table for a long time, staring at nothing. Emma joined him, but he didn't speak. She reached for his hand. He squeezed back once, then released. When he finally looked at her, there was a decision already made behind his eyes. I just need to settle something, he said. What did you promise him? Nothing yet. Michael, it'll be fine. He kissed her forehead. Trust me. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house seemed amplified. The creak of settling wood, the sigh of the vent, the hum of the refrigerator. She drifted off sometime after 3, her dreams crowded with half-remembered voices and the faint clink of glass. The next morning, Michael was gone early, leaving only a note on the counter. Site inspection, back for dinner. Love you. He never came back for dinner. Instead, the call came at dawn the next day, a woman's voice trembling on the other end.
Mrs. Lang? This is St. Brigham Hospital. I'm so sorry.
When she arrived, the world had already turned cold and bright, everything too clear. The hospital hall smelled of antiseptic and old coffee. Dr. Nathan Cole met her at the door of the emergency room, a man whose practiced calm felt like armor. He suffered a cardiac arrest, Cole said gently. There was nothing we could do. It was sudden. Emma heard herself ask questions as if from underwater. Could it have been stress, overwork, a stroke? Cole's answers were soft and final. An undiagnosed heart condition. It happens sometimes. I'm so sorry. She wanted to scream that it didn't make sense, that Michael's heart was the strongest thing she knew, but her voice wouldn't come. When she finally saw him, he looked almost peaceful, as if sleeping through the worst of the world. She touched his hand, still faintly warm, and whispered his name until the nurses led her away. The funeral blurred. People said kind things that dissolved before they reached her ears. Evan stood at the front, eyes red, face pale. He cried in great dramatic bursts, gripping her hand too tightly. He was my brother, he kept saying, as if repetition could wash him clean. Emma said nothing. After everyone left, she sat alone in the pew, listening to the echo of footsteps fade. Outside, snow began to fall again, light as dust. At home, the silence was unbearable. Michael's boots still by the door, his jacket still on the chair, his notes still scattered like breadcrumbs through their days. She found one that read, "Remember the good things." She pressed it to her chest and wept until the paper softened against her skin. In the weeks that followed, sympathy cards arrived like ghosts. Emma moved through her routines as if performing for an invisible audience. She handled bills, canceled appointments, tried to eat. She told herself that healing was just a matter of time, but time only rearranged the pain into new shapes. Then one morning, while sorting through bank statements for the estate lawyer, she saw it. A transfer dated 2 days before his death, $75,000. Recipient, Dr. Nathan Cole. Her breath caught. For a long moment, she simply stared at the numbers, trying to force them into a logic that didn't exist. Michael had never mentioned the doctor before. He would never move that much money without telling her. A pulse of dread moved through her, slow and deliberate. She logged into the joint account, tracing the transaction backward, and found what she both feared and expected. The funds had first appeared from another source, a secondary account under Evan Lang's name. Her mind flooded with fragments, the visit, the whiskey, the arguments, the fear in Evan's voice. The pattern arranged itself with horrifying clarity. Michael dead. Evan in debt. The doctor paid. It wasn't heart failure. It was something else entirely. She sat there for hours, the statement trembling in her hands, the house around her silent except for the ticking clock. The world she'd believed in, one built on trust, on ordinary love, on fairness, tilted, revealing the machinery underneath. By the time night fell, she'd made up her mind. She would find out exactly what happened, no matter how deep it went. The next day, she called the bank, pretending to be Dr. Cole's assistant needing verification for a pending audit. Her voice was calm, almost professional, but her hand shook as she wrote down every detail. The transfers matched. The timeline fit. The truth, at least the outline of it, was now undeniable. She stared at Michael's photo on the mantel, the smile that used to mean safety, and whispered, "I'll make it right." Outside, the snow had melted into rain, streaking the window pane like tears sliding down glass. Somewhere far away, a siren wailed, fading into the distance. And as the night deepened, Emma began to plan, not as a widow, but as someone who had just realized that grief and justice sometimes share the same face. Dr. Nathan Cole's office was the sort of place designed to calm people who were about to receive bad news. The lighting was soft but not dim, the walls an inoffensive beige decorated with watercolor landscapes that didn't belong to any real place. The faint smell of disinfectant lingered under a layer of something floral, synthetic lavender maybe, like an attempt to make sorrow smell polite. Emma sat in the chair across from his desk, her hands folded tightly in her lap, a gesture she'd learned in grief counseling but never practiced outside of it. Cole, tall and spare with a narrow face that gave away little, adjusted his glasses and offered her the professional half-smile of a man who lived daily at the border between empathy and detachment. "I understand this is difficult," he said. His voice carried the smooth cadence of habit, words rounded by years of repetition. "You mentioned you had questions about your husband's records." "Yes," Emma said. Her tone was careful, polite, the kind that didn't set off alarms. "I've been organizing things for the insurance and the estate. Some of the medical statements didn't line up. I just wanted to be sure I have everything correct." Cole nodded, turning to the computer on his desk. The monitor's glow washed his face in a thin blue light. "Of course. Michael Lang. Heart failure. Sudden onset. It's always tragic when it comes without warning." His tone softened, almost rehearsed. "You should know he didn't suffer." The words slid through her like ice. She'd heard them before, in that same gentle rhythm, as if grief could be muted by the right tempo. But now, sitting there, Emma noticed how easily they came, how practiced his expression was, how his hand trembled, not with compassion, but with nerves barely hidden. Her eyes flicked to the silver pen on his desk, perfectly aligned with a stack of forms. She imagined him signing death certificates the way other men signed dinner checks. "Was there ever an autopsy?" she asked. He hesitated for the smallest fraction of a second before answering. "No, it wasn't indicated. His condition was consistent with cardiac failure. We had a clear picture from his vitals and medical history." "He didn't have a history," Emma said, voice steady. "He was healthy." Cole's mouth twitched, then reset into its neutral line. "Sometimes these things are hidden. Genetics, congenital anomalies." "Do you remember," she interrupted softly, "who authorized the cremation so quickly? I wasn't asked." For a heartbeat, his composure cracked. A faint color rose along his neck. "That would have been standard procedure once the cause of death was certified. The funeral home handled—" "I know," Emma said, leaning forward slightly. "I just thought you might remember, since you signed the certificate." Cole looked down at his hands. "Mrs. Lang," he said, the tone of a man trying to reassert control of a conversation, "I can assure you everything was done properly." Her smile was thin. "I'm sure it was." They sat in silence long enough for the clock on the wall to tick through 15 seconds, each one loud enough to feel like a nail being driven. Then Emma reached into her bag and placed a small USB drive on the desk between them. Its metallic surface caught the fluorescent light and threw it back, sharp and white. "I brought something you might want to hear," she said. Cole blinked. "I'm not sure It's Evan," she said. "My husband's brother." His posture shifted, a subtle recoil. "What about him?" She clicked the pen in her hand, the tiny sound echoing. "You already know, don't you?" He opened his mouth, closed it again, exhaled. "I don't know what you're implying." "I think you do," Emma said. Her voice was low, almost kind. "I think you know exactly what that money was for." The silence that followed was a living thing, crawling between them. Cole's face drained of color. He reached for the pen again but didn't write anything, only turned it over and over in his fingers. The motion betrayed him. The calm veneer had cracked. "You don't understand what you're playing with," he said at last, his voice suddenly small. "It's not what you think." "Then explain it." He didn't. Instead, he stood abruptly, pacing toward the window where a gray Chicago afternoon pressed its reflection against the glass. The city beyond looked smeared, indistinct. "Evan came to me," he said finally, the words tumbling out as if pulled by gravity. "He said Michael was under stress, that he was drinking too much, that he needed something to regulate his heart rate. He wanted me to prescribe a mild sedative, something to help him rest." "And you believed him?" Cole turned. His eyes were bloodshot. "I wanted to. He said Michael was spiraling. He sounded desperate. He said he'd pay me privately because it was delicate. I thought, God help me. I thought I was helping." Emma rose, the chair legs scraping softly against the floor. "You thought you were helping by taking $75,000 from him?" Cole didn't answer. He was shaking now, shoulders hunched, breath uneven. "He told me it was to keep things quiet. I didn't ask questions." "And the medication?" "I ordered it under another name," he said, the words spilling faster now. "A compound with digoxin. It's used for arrhythmia. In small doses, it calms the heart. In large ones..." Emma's pulse thundered in her ears. "It stops it." Cole nodded, tears brimming. "He said it would just slow him down. That's all. I didn't..." His voice broke. "I didn't know he'd use it." "But you knew it was wrong." He wiped his face with a trembling hand. "You think I don't know that now? You think I sleep?" Emma picked up the USB drive, sliding it back into her bag. "You shouldn't," she said. "You should go to the police." "They won't believe me," Cole whispered. "Evan's gone. I've already heard things, people asking questions that shouldn't be asked. You don't understand who he owes." "Then make them believe you," Emma said. "Or I will." She turned to leave, her hand on the door when he called after her. "Mrs. Lang, Emma, please." His voice cracked, almost human now. "If you go to them, it won't just be him. They'll come after anyone connected. You could get hurt." She looked back at him, and for the first time there was no pity in her eyes. "I already am." When she stepped outside, the air hit her like a slap. The hospital's facade glared white against the overcast sky. Somewhere behind those walls, people were still being born, still dying, the machinery of mercy grinding on indifferent to who deserved what. She walked to her car, fingers trembling as she unlocked the door. Her reflection in the window looked like a stranger, hard-eyed, sleepless. Not the woman who had once spent her mornings picking out the right mug for Michael's coffee. She drove aimlessly at first, through streets that blurred into one another, until she found herself parked outside the small diner they used to visit on Sundays. The neon sign flickered in the window, open, but the place looked deserted. She went in anyway, sat in their old booth, ordered black coffee, and didn't drink it. She replayed Cole's words in her mind, each syllable another turn of the knife. Digoxin. Large doses. I didn't know. But he had known enough to hide it. Enough to take the money. Enough to let Michael die. Outside, the rain began to fall again, tapping the window with the soft persistence of guilt. Emma opened her bag and took out her phone. Evan's number was still there, pinned to the top of her contacts list from a time when family meant something different. Her finger hovered over it for a long moment before she pressed call. It rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. His voice was too cheerful. "Hey, it's Evan. Leave a message and I might call you back if you're lucky." She ended the call without speaking, her hand trembling. He was still out there, still breathing air. Michael never would again. By the time she got home, night had settled in full. She stood in the doorway of the living room where Michael's photo hung above the mantel. His eyes in the picture seemed to follow her, patient as ever, waiting.
"I found him," she whispered. "I found both of them."
The wind outside rattled the windows, a hollow, distant sound like footsteps in another room. She didn't sleep that night. She sat at the table with the bank statements spread out like evidence, the voice recording still on her phone, and a list of names she intended to learn more about. Somewhere on the edge of dawn, she began writing her notes in a small black notebook. Each line was clean, precise, deliberate. Each word carried the weight of a promise. By the time the sun rose, Emma Lang was no longer simply a widow. She was something sharper, something forged in the space between grief and fury. She stood, gathered the papers, and whispered into the quiet house, "It ends with him." Outside, the first light cut across the frozen lawn, turning the world the color of old steel. Rain drummed steadily against the window, blurring the skyline into a gray watercolor of towers and lights. The sound filled the apartment like a second heartbeat, one that reminded Emma she was still here, still breathing, even when everything inside her felt hollowed out. The papers on the table glowed pale under the lamplight. Printouts of bank statements, Cole's medical report, the signed death certificate with its clean, merciless lines. Each document was a brick in the wall, closing around her. She stared at Michael's signature on one of the old checks, written days before he died. That same familiar slope in the M, the quick flick at the end of the L. It was the handwriting of a man who believed tomorrow was certain. A man who hadn't seen the poison in the hands that offered him tea. Emma's phone buzzed once. A text from an unknown number. "Stop digging. You don't know what you're stepping into." No punctuation, no name. The kind of message that landed like a cold hand on the back of her neck. She sat very still, staring at it. Then she deleted it without replying. Her hand was trembling, but her resolve wasn't. Fear was a language she had already learned. It no longer surprised her. Instead, she opened her laptop, logging into Michael's company account. She'd avoided it for weeks, telling herself it was too painful to go through his work files, the invoices, the half-finished projects that still bore his notes. But pain had become secondary to truth. Inside, she found folders named after client addresses and material suppliers, clean and meticulous, until she reached one labeled Lang Co. Lot Archive. It was locked, password protected. She tried the usual suspects. Michael 123, Lang Construction, Emma. None worked. Then, staring at his photo on the wall, she remembered something. He'd once joked that his password was the one thing he could say every morning and mean it. She typed, "Love you, M." The folder opened. Inside were spreadsheets of cash flow, blueprints, tax files, and one subfolder marked private. She clicked it open and froze. There, among contracts and scanned receipts, was a PDF titled Evan Payment Agreement.pdf. Her throat went dry. She opened it. The document was dated 6 months earlier. It was a private agreement between Michael Lang and Evan Lang. a contract stating that Michael had loaned his brother $50,000 to be repaid within 3 months. There was a handwritten note at the bottom in Evan's sprawling scrawl. "Promise to pay back with interest. You're saving my ass again, Mike. I owe you big time." He had never paid it back. Instead, he had bought whiskey and poison. Emma sat there a long while staring at that single sheet of paper. When she finally moved, it was with mechanical precision. She printed the file, slipped it into her notebook, and picked up her coat. Outside, the city breathed around her. Distant sirens, the hiss of tires through puddles, the low hum of life that didn't stop just because hers had been broken. She drove through the wet streets until she reached the diner again, the one where she'd met Cole days earlier. It was nearly empty now. A lone waitress wiped down the counter, and the jukebox murmured something old and lonely. Emma sat in the back booth and ordered tea. The irony didn't escape her. She waited. It was almost midnight when a car pulled up outside, headlights washing briefly over the rain-streaked windows. A man stepped out, tall, familiar in silhouette. Evan. He looked thinner than before, his face drawn, movements jerky. When he entered the diner, the bell above the door jingled a sound too cheerful for the moment. His eyes scanned the room, landing on her. "Jesus, Emma," he muttered as he slid into the booth opposite her. "What are you doing here?" "Waiting for you," she said. He smirked, though his eyes flickered nervously toward the windows. "You shouldn't have called." "I didn't," she said. "But you came anyway." He frowned. "Then how?" "I talked to Cole." The words landed like a stone dropped in still water. Evan's face twitched, every muscle tightening, then forcing itself to relax. "Cole's a coward," he said finally. "You can't believe anything that comes out of his mouth." "I believe the bank," she said, "and the numbers don't lie." He laughed, but it sounded hollow. "You've been busy." "You killed him." Evan flinched. His jaw worked, but no words came. Then, quietly, he said, "You think I wanted this?" "I think you wanted money," Emma said. "And when he said no, you found another way to take it." He leaned forward, his voice low and sharp. "You don't get it. You think Michael was some saint, but he was in deep. The company was bleeding. He was going to lose everything. I tried to help him." "By poisoning him?" "That wasn't supposed to happen," Evan snapped, then caught himself. The silence that followed was thick and damning. Emma stared at him, her nails digging into her palms until she felt pain anchor her. "Say that again." He looked away. It was supposed to scare him, make him sell the land, take the insurance early, start over. Cole said he'd handle the dose. "Cole worked for you." "He worked for the people I owed," Evan said. "They wanted their money back. They said—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "They said if I didn't pay, they'd take it another way." Emma felt a cold certainty settle over her. "So you offered them my husband?" Evan's voice broke. "I didn't think he'd die." "But he did." The words cracked between them like thunder. For a moment, neither spoke. The waitress brought the check without asking and slipped away, sensing something brittle in the air. Evan rubbed his temples. "They won't let me walk away. You don't understand who these people are." "I don't care," Emma said. "I'm going to the police." He laughed again, harsh this time. "And tell them what? That a grieving widow thinks her husband was poisoned because of some missing money? You'll end up dead before they even file a report." She looked at him steadily. "Then I'll make sure they find your name first." That silenced him. He looked at her, really looked, and saw for the first time the thing she'd become. Not a woman destroyed, but one remade in loss, something unbreakable. He stood abruptly, tossing a few bills on the table. "You don't know what you're doing, Emma. Stay out of it." She didn't move as he walked out into the rain. But through the diner window, she watched him fumble for his keys, glance over his shoulder, and disappear into the darkness. When she finally rose, she felt nothing, no fear, no satisfaction, just purpose. The next morning, she went to the police. Detective Ryan Morales listened patiently, nodding as she laid out her evidence, the transactions, the USB, the recorded message. He promised to look into it, his tone careful, measured. But she saw the skepticism in his eyes. When she left the station, a black sedan idled across the street, the same one she'd noticed outside her apartment 2 nights earlier. She turned toward it, and the engine started immediately, pulling away into traffic. That night, she double-locked the doors. Every creak of the house felt like a warning, but fear had turned into fuel. She began documenting everything: dates, amounts, phone calls, faces. She stored copies of her files in 3 different cloud drives, mailed one envelope to her lawyer labeled, "To be opened if anything happens to me." In her dreams, Michael appeared by the lake, hands buried in his pockets, his expression calm but unreadable. He didn't speak, but the wind around him whispered one word, over and over: finish. So she did. She returned to the hospital the following week, claiming to be there for a donation inquiry. Instead, she followed Dr. Cole's assistant to the parking lot and waited. When Cole came out, she stepped from behind the column. "You didn't tell me everything," she said. He froze. "You shouldn't be here. I'm not leaving until you give me the names of the people Evan worked for." Cole's hands trembled. "You'll get yourself killed." "Maybe," Emma said, "but not before I bury him properly." He stared at her for a long moment, then pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "This is all I have," he said. "Don't say I gave it to you." She unfolded it. 3 names, 1 address, a bank. By the time she looked up, Cole was already gone. That night, she sat at her kitchen table with a glass of wine and the list before her. Her reflection in the window looked older, harder, the kind of woman who'd stopped expecting mercy from anyone. She opened her notebook and wrote a single sentence beneath the last entry. "Tomorrow, I start hunting." Outside, the wind carried the first whisper of snow, brushing against the windows like breath. Somewhere far beyond the quiet suburb, the city's lights burned against the dark, relentless, indifferent, eternal. And Emma, the widow who'd once only known how to survive, began to plan how to strike. The snow had thickened overnight, draping the city in silence. It wasn't the soft, cinematic kind that made people think of Christmas. It was the dense, wet kind that absorbed sound, turning the world into a muffled, uneasy dream. Emma Lang watched it from the window of her apartment, fingers tight around a mug she hadn't sipped in an hour. On the table behind her lay a spread of notes and photos, a collage of proof pinned together by grief and fury. Cole's confession, Evan's name scrawled on the bank transactions, the folded paper with 3 names and 1 address written in a doctor's nervous hand. The address was in South Chicago, on the edge of an industrial district where the streetlights flickered like old memories. She had looked it up the night before. It belonged to a warehouse registered under an import company that didn't seem to import anything. No website, no phone listing, no trace in any business directory she could find. A shell. A shadow. Emma set down the mug, pulled on her coat, and slipped the folded list into her pocket. She didn't tell anyone where she was going, not that there was anyone left to tell. The drive south took her through streets that seemed to empty as she went. Snow flurried in the headlights, the air dense with the smell of iron and exhaust. When she finally found the warehouse, it sat behind a chain-link fence topped with curling barbed wire. The sign on the gate read, L&H, Freight Company, but the paint was peeling, the letters fading into rust. She parked across the street, engine off, heart thudding against the quiet. Through the fogged windshield, she could see faint light leaking through a window on the second floor. Figures moved inside, 2, maybe 3. She watched for a long time, letting her breath slow before pulling out her phone. Detective Morales' card was still in her wallet. His voice, calm and skeptical, echoed in her head. "Leave this to us, Mrs. Lang. You don't want to make enemies you can't see." She dialed his number anyway. It rang twice, then went to voicemail.
"It's Emma Lang," she said. "I found something. A warehouse in South Chicago, L&H Freight. If anything happens," she paused, "you'll know where to start."
She hung up and stepped out of the car. The air bit at her skin, snow catching in her hair as she crossed the street. The gate wasn't locked. It groaned open, metal grinding against metal. Inside the yard, footprints led from the gate to the warehouse door, fading under a thin layer of snow. She followed them. The door wasn't fully closed. A sliver of yellow light spilled through the crack. Emma pushed gently and slipped inside. The warehouse smelled of oil, mold, and the faint sting of bleach. Rows of crates lined the walls, some open and half empty, their contents shrouded in plastic. Somewhere deeper in the building, a man was talking, low, irritated. "Told him the money's late. I don't care what he says about his brother. If he doesn't pay, we make an example." The voice was sharp, confident. Another voice answered, nervous. "He said he's got something coming in. Insurance or some kind of payout. Couple of days tops." Emma moved closer, crouching behind a stack of crates. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Through a narrow gap she could see them. Two men in heavy jackets standing by a folding table, cigarette smoke curling around them. Between them sat a laptop, its screen glowing blue in the dim. One of them turned and she caught a glimpse of his face. She recognized it instantly from the photo Cole had given her. Rico Morales, no relation to the detective, but the name had been on the list. Ex-con, small-time enforcer, now apparently in charge of something larger. The second man spoke again, quieter this time. "What about the doctor?" Rico flicked ash from his cigarette. "He's done. Liability. You know how it goes." Emma's throat tightened. She knew what that meant. They talked a little longer, voices fading as they walked toward the back of the warehouse. She waited until their footsteps disappeared, then slipped from her hiding place. Her hands shook as she scanned the table. A ledger sat beside the laptop, open to a list of names and numbers. She took out her phone and snapped photos of every page. When she looked up again, her reflection caught in the laptop screen, a pale ghost in the glow of stolen light. Then came the voice behind her. "Lady, you lost?" She spun. Rico stood a few yards away, one hand still holding his cigarette, the other resting casually on the gun at his hip. The second man hovered behind him, eyes wide, uncertain. Emma froze, heart kicking hard against her ribs. My car broke down," she stammered. "I saw the light. I just needed—" Rico's smile was small and mean. "That's a terrible lie." He moved closer, the smoke from his cigarette coiling between them. "You don't look like a car problem, sweetheart. You look like a curiosity problem." She backed up, her heel catching on the edge of a crate. "Please, Then something shifted in the air behind Rico. A new sound, soft but distinct. The metallic click of a safety being released. Rico turned, fast. A voice from the shadows said, "Drop it." For a moment, no one moved. Then Rico raised both hands, slowly. Emma saw the figure step into the light. Detective Morales. His coat was wet with snow, his eyes fixed on the man's gun. "I told you to leave this alone," he said without looking at her. "I tried," she said. Rico laughed, low. "So the widow brought the cavalry." Morales ignored him. "Step back, Emma. Go outside. Now." She didn't move. "They killed him. I have proof." "I know," Morales said, voice sharp. But you can't prove anything if you're dead. The second man bolted toward the back door. Morales turned his gun toward him, shouting for him to stop. Rico moved in that split second, grabbing the laptop from the table and hurling it at Morales. It hit his arm, and the shot went wide, splintering a crate. Chaos broke open. Emma ducked as Rico lunged for the side exit. Morales cursed, chasing after him, the echo of boots and gunfire ricocheting through the warehouse. Emma scrambled to her feet, grabbing the ledger. She stuffed it into her coat and ran. Outside, the night roared with the sudden wail of sirens. Morales had called for backup after all. Red and blue lights flashed across the snow as unmarked cars screeched to a stop. By the time they surrounded the building, Rico was gone. Hours later, Emma sat in the back of an ambulance, blanket around her shoulders, answering the same questions again and again. Morales stood nearby, face drawn, talking to a uniformed officer. When he finally approached her, he looked both angry and exhausted. "You could have been killed." "I almost was," she said. "But now we have this." She handed him the ledger. He flipped through it, scanning the pages. His expression changed, the color draining from his face. "Jesus Christ, these are payoffs. Half the city's under the table here. Lawyers, doctors, maybe even cops." "Including Cole," she said. He nodded slowly. "Including Cole." They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the low hum of radios and the distant churn of snowplows. "What happens now?" she asked. Morales sighed. Now we start digging for real. But you stay out of it. You've done enough." She looked at him, eyes tired but steady. "You don't understand. I can't stop until it's finished. Emma, he died for nothing if I stop now." Morales rubbed his temples. "If you keep going like this, you'll end up in the same place he did." "Then at least I'll know why." The detective stared at her for a long moment, then finally said, "I'll call you when we have something. Promise me you won't do anything stupid." "I already did," she said softly. "And it's the only reason we're here." He didn't argue. He just turned away, muttering something under his breath as he went to brief his team. Emma watched him disappear into the swirl of lights and snow. She felt hollow, but somewhere under the exhaustion was the quiet pulse of victory. For the first time since Michael's death, she had taken something back from the dark. When she finally went home, dawn was breaking, a thin silver light spreading across the rooftops. She stood at the window, watching the city wake, the snow glinting like glass. The ledger lay open on the table beside her, a map of corruption that reached farther than she could have imagined. One name stood out among the others, Evan Lang. Next to it, in neat handwriting, was a date and a single word: delivery. Tomorrow. Emma closed the book. She didn't need Morales to tell her what that meant. Her brother-in-law was still alive, and someone was paying him. Tomorrow, she thought. One last chapter. One final reckoning. The world seemed made of glass that morning, thin, brittle, and shining with deceptive calm. The snow had stopped, leaving a pale crust over the streets, a quietness that felt like the moment after a confession. Emma Lang drove through it in a borrowed car, the steering wheel cold under her palms, her mind as still as the road stretching ahead. The address from the ledger had burned a hole in her thoughts all night. Warehouse 19B, East Bridge Industrial Park. Delivery, Evan Lang. She didn't feel fear anymore. Fear was an old, spent flame. What remained now was something sharper, an exhaustion that no longer distinguished between courage and despair. By the time she reached the outskirts of the city, dawn had turned the horizon a bruised shade of purple. The warehouse sat at the end of a cracked road, half hidden behind freight containers and the skeleton of an old factory. The air smelled of rust and diesel. A single truck idled near the loading dock, its exhaust ghosting into the cold. Evan was there, He stood by the truck, coat collar turned up, cigarette burning between his fingers. Even from the car, Emma could see the tremor in his hands. He looked smaller than she remembered, as if time and guilt had conspired to hollow him out. When she stepped out, her boots crunching on the icy ground, he turned. "Jesus," he muttered, exhaling smoke. "I was hoping you'd be smarter than this."
"I learned from you," she said.
He laughed once, a sound with no humor in it. "You shouldn't be here. Neither should you." He flicked the cigarette away, watching it die in the snow. "You think you understand what this is about, but you don't. You never did. I understand you killed your brother." His jaw tightened. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that. That's what you always say." He looked past her, scanning the street. Somewhere a crow called, the sound slicing through the cold air. "You brought the cops?" "No, just me." He nodded slowly, as if that confirmed what he already knew. You always had to do things your own way. Just like him. They stood in silence for a long time, the distance between them filled with everything unsaid. Years of holidays forced into politeness, dinners that curdled into arguments, the long shadow of Michael's generosity that Evan had never been able to live under without hating it. Finally, Emma said, "Why, Evan? Was it just the money?" He hesitated, then shrugged, almost gently. "It started that way. Then it became about something else. He had everything, respect, a house, you. People looked at him like he was solid ground. Me, I was the story they told their kids about how not to end up. So you destroyed him." "I thought I could scare him," Evan said quietly. "Make him see that he wasn't untouchable. The doctor said it would just slow his heart. Just a warning. I didn't want—" She cut him off. "You didn't want him dead. But you took the money anyway. You let them bury him without questions. You stood next to me and cried like you lost something you didn't even want to keep." Evan looked down. "You think I don't hate myself for it? I think you don't hate yourself enough." He took a step closer. "You think this is justice, Emma? Coming here, waving your anger around like a gun? You can't fix this. You can't bring him back." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the small recorder she'd been carrying since that night with Cole. "No," she said, "but I can make sure you never get to pretend again." His eyes widened. "You're recording this?" "Every word." He moved then, too fast. He lunged for her wrist, the motion clumsy, desperate. They struggled, slipping on the thin crust of ice, breath coming in sharp clouds. The recorder clattered to the ground. Evan grabbed her shoulders, shaking her once, hard. "Stop!" he shouted. "You don't know what they'll do." "Then tell me," she shouted back. Something in him broke. He released her, stumbling backward, hands trembling. "They'll kill me," he said. "You don't understand. They already killed Cole. He was next on their list. I'm just trying to buy time." "Time for what?" "For you," he said, almost whispering. "They told me to make sure you kept quiet. They said if I didn't—" He stopped, voice breaking. "They said they'd make it look like an accident, like his." Emma felt the ground tilt beneath her. "You knew. Even after he died, you still let them threaten me." Evan's face twisted, pain and shame colliding. "I didn't have a choice." "You always had a choice," she said. "Michael did. That's what made him better than you." For a moment, the only sound was the hiss of the truck engine. Then faintly, she heard sirens in the distance. Evan heard them too. His head jerked toward the sound. "You called them," he said. "I didn't have to." He looked at her for a long time, then nodded, a sad, crooked smile bending his mouth. "Guess that's it then." He turned, walking toward the truck. "Evan?" she said, but he didn't stop. She followed him, slow at first, then faster when she saw him reach into his coat. For one terrible second, she thought he had a gun. but when he pulled his hand free, it held only a small vial. Clear, half full.
"Don't,"
she said. He looked back at her, eyes wet, jaw set. "It's the same stuff," he said. "Maybe that's fair." Before she could move, he uncapped it and swallowed. She reached him just as he fell, catching him as his knees buckled. His body was warm, his heartbeat wild and erratic against her hands. He tried to speak, but the words came out broken. "I wanted to make it right," he murmured. Emma pressed a hand to his cheek.
"You can't,"
she whispered.
"It's too late."
He smiled faintly, eyes unfocused. "Tell him I'm sorry." Then he was gone. The sirens grew louder until they filled the air, red and blue flashing across the snow. Detective Morales was the first to reach her, kneeling beside the body, his expression grim. "What happened?" he asked.
"He confessed,"
she said, her voice distant.
"And then he punished himself."
Morales nodded, signaling the paramedics, though there was nothing left to save. When they lifted Evan away, the morning had turned bright, sunlight breaking through the gray clouds for the first time in days. Emma stood in it, eyes closed, the cold biting her skin. Later at the station, she gave her statement. They took the ledger, the recordings, everything. Morales promised her it would all be enough, that the people behind it would face charges, that her husband's name would be cleared. She wanted to believe him. By the time she returned home, the snow had melted into slush. The house felt smaller now, quieter, as if it had been waiting for her to come back and finish the story. She walked through each room, touching the edges of furniture, the picture frames, the empty space where Michael's boots used to be. In the kitchen, sunlight pooled on the table. She sat and pulled out her notebook, the one she'd filled with every detail, every lead, every ache. Slowly, she turned to the last page and wrote, "It's done." Her hand hovered over the paper, then moved again, the words forming one after another until they filled the page. He deserved peace. Now he has it. And maybe, so do I. When she closed the notebook, something in her chest loosened. Outside, the world went on. Children played in the melting snow, their laughter faint but real. Somewhere a dog barked. Somewhere a train passed, its low rumble like a heartbeat returning after a long silence. Emma stood, walked to the porch, and looked out at the street where the last of the snow was dissolving into rivulets of clear water. She thought of Michael, his laugh, his steady hands, the smell of sawdust on his clothes. She could almost see him there, leaning on the porch rail, smiling at her the way he used to, the morning sun turning his hair to gold.
"Hey,"
she whispered.
"It's over."
The wind stirred, lifting her hair. It felt like an answer. She smiled, small and tired and true. Then she turned back inside, leaving the door open behind her to let the light in. In the living room, the framed photo of them on their wedding day caught the sun and gleamed for a moment. Two people frozen in joy, unaware of what the world would take, or how love could outlast even that. Emma sat beside it, breathing slow, the quiet settling around her, not as absence, but as peace. And for the first time since the night the sirens came, she let herself cry. Not in rage, not in grief, but in release. Outside, spring was coming.